What is the fastest and most efficient way of attaining enlightenment?
Be here now.
Yeah, but the word attaining
Oh, yes, right, good.
implies something that may not be completely efficient. The fastest way is to suddenly realize you're enlightened.
Yes, well, good point.
And, you know, the kingdom of God is at hand. Stop resisting the truth. It's a good way. You know, stop complaining that you don't understand something and look.
Yes, and stop trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
In other words, most of the problems are in our minds. You know, we just want
yes.
too much interference for ourselves.
Yeah, all of the problems are in our minds.
Yeah. So I guess the most efficient way is to stop thinking.
Yes, there's a thought. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I mean, that's really direct, and direct is efficient.
Wasn't that the question?
Yes, that's why I used the word just now.
All of this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Other voices?
Well, I think I can't really add anything more to what Siri just said, but the first thing that came to mind when I heard the question was, you know, that there is nothing to attain. It's actually to realize, which is what Siri alluded to. But then it came to my mind, what would make that realization happen? And the answer is practice, and more practice. So
yes, right.
You have to love the truth behind the teaching enough
to be able to practice it.
Yeah. In order to practice it or do anything else that you think will, you know, fertilize the ground or clear out the clutter or whatever.
Right. Well, it's almost like cleansing that mind, you know, that clutters the mind with thoughts, and arriving at that thoughtless state to be able to realize that whatever the mind thinks it is out there to seek, it's actually here already.
Yes. How else would it be in your mind?
Exactly.
When I wrote this question, I sort of meant it as a trick question. So, you know, as Robert Frost so famously said, two roads diverged in a yellow wood. One was the direct path and one was the indirect path. You know, it was a trick question in the sense that I'm asking what the fastest and most efficient way of doing it is. But as with most things, we live in a culture and a society that is obsessed with the fastest and most efficient. And
with doing.
Right. And as we have learned with manufacturing and everything else, the fastest and most efficient isn't always the best. In many cases, it's the worst. Most traditions do not talk about the fastest and most efficient way of becoming enlightened or attaining enlightenment or whatnot. There is some of that in Tibetan Buddhism. It's more of the exception that proves the rule. But I would venture to answer this question by saying, why on earth would we want the fastest and most efficient way of doing it? The journey is what's most enjoyable. Let's enjoy the journey.
Right. You don't know where along the path of the journey you're going to discover what you're seeking. Just, you know, take the journey and pay attention.
Well, there is the notion that you have to be on the right journey.
Well, yes, but if you're paying attention, you might realize you're not going in the right direction.
You have to be on the right journey, but there are journeys that are on flat ground and straight paths, and there are journeys that are winding small paths through mountains with brambles in their way, but that'll still get you to the top. It's all about enjoyment. And one thing that I've realized in life is the more that you're trying to attain something, the more that you're trying to do something fast and efficient, whether it's produce something or achieve some sort of spiritual goal, the less you're actually focused on the here and now, the less you're paying attention to things right now. And all sorts of myriad beautiful things could be staring you in your face, and you could be forgetting about them and not noticing them because you have a goal in mind rather than the journey. And I think the most important, the spiritual path is in fact the path.
Yeah, I get the point. Yeah.
I might, as an aside, say it's a pleasure to hear somebody use the word myriad correctly. Most people would say
yes.
a myriad of, but this
yes,
is
it doesn't need a preposition. Yes.
That's right. That's right. But other than that, yes.
Other than that, there's good stuff too.
Other than that, there's good stuff there too. Yes.
How important is it to work on the practices? I think of an artist who uses flawed techniques to make a nearly perfect work versus an artist who is so focused on technique or perfection in one process that the actual work is flawed or never finished. Where for you does the balance lie?
I tend to be unbalanced myself on the direction of trying to make something perfect. Problem I have if I'm writing is that I keep erasing what I just wrote and rephrase it and stuff like that. So yeah, it's very frustrating. It's not very productive either.
Yes, I think that's an open question at all times, is how much do you want to perfect the technique versus how much does that technique contribute to the whole?
Yeah.
That's perpetually an open question, it seems to me. And whatever art you are involved in, there may be an occasion for stepping back and practicing some little tiny part of the art.
Yeah. There's the problem is the technique or the skill is for something. And you have to remember what it's for. So if you're an artist that's just focused on technique, you've forgotten what art is for. Although there is a certain beauty in excellent technique. That's a different thing.
Well, what was it Michelangelo said about trifles make perfection and perfection's no trifle?
But it was also Michelangelo who would purposefully leave things unfinished in order to make it more perfect.
Obviously a time for that too.
Right, in the sense that one reason, and they've discovered this, I mean, is that one reason why reproductions and computer generated things look less perfect is that they're too perfect. The human eye likes imperfection. It looks natural, it looks organic. And when something is so perfect in terms of a work of art, it doesn't look natural. It doesn't look like it's been created by the human hand. And that's a downside.
Yeah.
True. Certainly true.
But at any rate, we've discussed that, but I mean, in terms of the practices themselves, which is really the root of the question I'm asking here.
Now, are we talking about spiritual practices here?
Yes, the spiritual practices.
Okay.
Because the spiritual practices are a work of art. As Plotinus said, make your life a work of art, make your spiritual devotions a work of art. And I'm just was relating that to artistic practices because I think it has some relevance. Many people will strive for perfection in their spiritual practices, and that helps. Other people do that and lose the forest through the trees. So where for you in terms of your spiritual practice is the balance? When is it time to say enough is enough, no more perfection, let's just get down to business? And when is it time to say, this isn't working well for me, let's focus on technique?
Well, it's a little bit connected to, if you're perfecting your technique, you have to not lose sight of what it's for.
Right. It's interesting. I've had just the opposite problem at one of the Tariqa retreats, in which Polly was suggesting an exercise, a technique in, let's say, a focus in concentrating, equanimity of mind. And people objected and said, no, we have the divine name. That's our practice. That's what we should be doing.
Right, as if they were mutually exclusive.
So the analogy I tried to I came up with, stop me if you've heard this, was to say it's like, let's say you want to be a great runner, and you run all you can, and that's what you think you do to be a great runner. And then at some point somebody says, wait a minute, if you'd stop running for part of your day and do some weight training, you'd be a better runner.
Yeah.
But you'd have to stop running to do that. And that's, am I making any sense here?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, in this example, it is good to do a lot of running, because that's how you learn about running, and and hopefully how to do it well. But you could say the same thing about breathing as weightlifting, as resistance training, because there's breathing is really important if you're running. It's pretty important most of the time, but
right. Yeah, most of the time.
Well, I've actually heard religious people say we've been put on this planet to pray. I don't mean to insult them, but I think that's ridiculous. We've been put on this planet to live, and if we live rightly, that itself is a form of prayer. And I personally don't see how someone spending all of their time, in seclusion in prayer without having lived life could possibly pray with the same fullness of heart, which is why in many spiritual traditions, they don't actually allow someone to take the vows of monastic orders until they have been out in the world for some time.
Right. Well, Thomas Merton needed to get special permission to live in his little house off the side. And it makes sense. Also, after all, you look at some of the monasteries, and the people who live there do a lot of work. A little like, is it all right if we smoke while we're praying? Versus, is it all right if we pray while we're smoking? That was a good story. Where did that come from anyway?
That was an interview with Sheikh Isa.
It was?
Yeah. I thought that, well, no, it was told, I think, by Whitall Perry in response to a question that someone had asked Sheikh Isa. He was setting the context.
That sounds right.
The story didn't happen there. But
no,
the smoking story, but that's where it got told for some context.
Right. That clicks. Right. It's so perfect coming from his mouth.
But I think what we're scooting around is the fact that any act performed in the right way is an act of prayer. Smoking can be an act of prayer. It doesn't have to be an Islamic prayer.
Yes, the Native Americans have proven that smoking can be a prayer.
But somehow you have to connect that to your spiritual life.
Well, or turn it into a persistent attitude of some kind.
That solves the problem, yes.
Well, Sheikh al-Bashir, let me know if you get what I'm trying to say here. But what I'm trying to say here is that it's a problem when we separate things into our lives and our spiritual lives.
Yes, that is certainly true.
Only part of our lives are spiritual. We need to make sure that everything in our life is spiritual. Then our entire lives are spiritual lives, and everything that we do that's so mundane is suffused with spirituality.
Yes.
But as Sidi Talha says, that's an attitude that one needs to have to connect what one's doing. And presumably, if you have the attitude, and I think if you have the attitude, of any activity will serve that purpose. As someone I know once said, you could worship a fire hydrant with the right attitude, and it would bring you deliverance. But you can't just play pinball and say, well, you know, all my life's enjoyable and is a prayer.
No, I don't know. My attitude toward pinball has really been that it's well, the closest I've ever been when I was a certain age to perfection.
Interesting topic, yes.
Yeah, I loved pinball. And I got pretty good at it.
Well,
which only makes sense.
Well, I mean, it requires a great degree of and depth of concentration. So maybe one reason you are at where you're at right now on the spiritual path is because of everything you learned while playing pinball.
Yeah, could be.
You know, it's a little bit like Karate Kid, where he's having him do all of these strange things like wax the car, and he's like, what's this for? What's this for? And then you realize that that's helping him on his personal path. And I think that's it. I think everything in life is a training ground for the spiritual life. And I think, as you said, Sheikh al-Bashir, it all comes down to attitude. What's our attitude when we're doing certain things? Certainly, if our attitude is, oh, I'm going to, just hang around at the court and throw hoops all day and do nothing else with my life, but I'll call that prayer, that's not helpful. But if, on the other hand, whatever you do in life, including things you must do every day, like brushing your teeth, washing the dishes, if you turn it into an actual act of prayer, if you put the effort into it, the thought into it, and make it something religious, something spiritual, then it will be something religious.
Or take the thought out of it.
I think that's well said.